Some people don't need enemies to destroy them. They do it themselves, one careless sentence at a time, not with fists, not with scandal, but with simple everyday words that sound bold, confident, maybe even wise. But beneath that surface, it's fear, it's pride, it's stagnation disguised as strength. You've heard these phrases before. Maybe you've even said them offhand without thinking. That's just who I am. I don't need to explain myself. It is what it is. And just like that, without realizing it, we build walls where there should be doors. We trade awareness for ego, curiosity for certainty, growth for comfort. The Stoics warned us, the soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. But what if it's not just thoughts? What if it's our words, those quiet, casual phrases that shape our identity, our future, and our peace? Today, we're not here to shame anyone. We're here to wake up. Because the difference between wisdom and ignorance isn't how much you know, it's how honestly you're willing to listen, reflect, and change. So stay with me. You might recognize a few of these lines, and that recognition might just be the first step to becoming something stronger, sharper, more grounded. If you're ready to stop speaking from ego and start speaking from awareness, consider subscribing. Let's keep building something real. 1. That's just how I am. You've probably heard someone say it before, that's just how I am. Maybe you've even said it yourself. It usually shows up during a tough conversation, maybe after hurting someone's feelings or dodging responsibility, and at first it sounds solid, strong, like a statement of self-awareness. But take a closer look, and it's really just a wall, a defense mechanism, a subtle way of saying, I don't want to look at this more deeply. It pretends to be truth, but it's actually resistance. Resistance to change, resistance to self-examination. And when we keep using it, it becomes a quiet kind of self-sabotage. The Stoics believed that life is a constant process of refinement. Seneca once said, as long as you live, keep learning how to live. That's not just advice, it's a challenge. It means that the process of becoming better never ends. You're not a fixed identity. You're not a label. You're a work in progress, whether you choose to participate in that progress or not. When someone says, that's just how I am, what they're really doing is closing the door on that process. They're choosing comfort over growth, familiar pain over unfamiliar progress. Let's be honest. It's uncomfortable to admit we need to change. It requires humility. It means facing the fact that the way we've been showing up, maybe for years, isn't working anymore. And the ego hates that. The ego wants to be right, not real. It wants to stay in charge, even if that means keeping us stuck. That's why that's just how I am is so dangerous. It gives the ego permission to stop evolving. And when growth stops, suffering sneaks in. Carl Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Think about that. What you're avoiding, those blind spots, those patterns you excuse away with a shrug, are actually shaping your destiny. You're not fated to be short-tempered. You're not born to be closed off or impatient or emotionally unavailable. You're just used to being that way. And that's just how I am is the excuse you use to avoid confronting it. And it's not just about relationships or personality. This mindset seeps into every part of life. People use it in their careers. I'm not good with money. I'm just not organized. I've never been a morning person. But what they're really saying is, I'm unwilling to put in the work to become better. Intelligence, discipline, kindness, emotional depth, these aren't gifts. They're skills. And like any skill, they require practice. You're not supposed to be good at everything naturally. You're supposed to be willing to learn. Stoicism teaches us that character is shaped by choices, not excuses. You surrender it to your past, your wounds, your habits. But your past is not your prison. It's your raw material. Your mistakes, your upbringing, your trauma, they don't define you unless you let them. They're the stone you carve your character from. But let's be real, change is hard. It's messy, it's slow, and it usually starts with discomfort. You realize something about yourself. Maybe you're defensive, impatient, dismissive, and your first reaction might be shame. You want to hide from it. But Stoicism doesn't ask for perfection. It asks for courage. The courage to face what is. The courage to say, this part of me needs work. That's not weakness. That's self-respect. The irony is, the people who say, that's just how I am, are usually trying to protect their identity. But in doing so, they trap themselves in it. They freeze in place while the world moves on. They become like statues, solid, unmoving, slowly forgotten. Because here's the truth. People grow apart when one of them refuses to grow at all. You might be staying the same, thinking you're being real or loyal to who you are. But what you're really doing is slowly becoming irrelevant to your goals, your relationships, your potential. Aristotle believed that excellence is not an act, but a habit. He said, we are what we repeatedly do. So if you keep repeating the same reactions, the same attitudes, the same excuses, that becomes your identity, not because it's true, but because it's familiar. If you want to change your life, change your habits. And if you want to change your habits, start by changing your words. Replace, that's just how I am, with, this is something I can work on. That small shift is everything. Even the way we talk to ourselves matters. That's just how I am becomes a script we run in our heads every time we mess up. We use it to dodge the hard work of accountability. But imagine how different things could be if you spoke to yourself the way a wise friend would. Not harshly, not with shame, but with truth. Something like, this isn't working for me anymore, and that's okay. I can try something else. That's where real power comes from. Not from pretending you're fine as you are, but from realizing you're not finished, and never will be. And here's something worth thinking about. The people you admire most. They didn't get there by staying the same. They got there by constantly refining themselves, by being honest about what wasn't serving them, by outgrowing the versions of themselves that were holding them back. That's the path. Not dramatic overnight change, but steady, honest growth. The Stoics didn't just preach discipline and logic, they lived it. They challenged themselves daily to become better men, better thinkers, better citizens. Epictetus said, no man is free who is not master of himself. You can't be free if you're still chained to the belief that you can't change. You can't grow if you're still defending the parts of yourself that are quietly destroying your potential. So the next time that phrase rises up, that's just how I am. Pause. Ask yourself, is this really who I am? Or is it who I've settled for? You are not your worst habits. You are not your default settings. You are what you're willing to confront and change. That's where identity lives, not in comfort, but in the fire of self-awareness. The real tragedy of that's just how I am isn't that it sounds ignorant. It's that it kills curiosity. It stops questions before they're even asked. It silences the voice inside you that wants to do better, feel deeper, live fuller. And if you repeat it long enough, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. You become a character in your own life, a flat, unchanging version of someone who once had potential, but chose to coast instead. But there's another way. You can challenge the script. You can choose to speak differently, think differently, show up differently. You can say, I've got work to do, and I'm okay with that. You can see yourself as a student of life, Not someone who's arrived, but someone who's still climbing. You can practice what Carl Jung called individuation, the ongoing process of becoming your most whole and honest self. He said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. And who you truly are is not fixed. It's unfolding. So don't waste that privilege hiding behind a phrase that keeps you small. Don't mistake being stuck for being strong. You have permission to evolve, not because you're broken, but because you're human, because the best parts of you are still waiting to be discovered." 2. That's how it's always been. You've probably heard it before, maybe in a meeting, during an argument, or when someone's feeling cornered. They shrug, almost proud, and say, "Well, that's how it's always been." It lands with finality, like a brick wall. No more questions, no room for change, just tradition, routine, comfort. And while that might feel safe, the truth is that sentence has stopped more growth, progress, and possibility than almost anything else. It's not a reason, it's a reflex. A mental shortcut that shuts down thinking before it even begins. It sounds responsible. It sounds like wisdom. But often, it's fear wearing a mask. Let's be real. Change is uncomfortable. It challenges your sense of identity. It pushes you to examine systems, choices, relationships, and beliefs you've held for years. That's hard. It's far easier to hold on to what's familiar, to defend the past like it's sacred. But as the Stoic philosopher Epictetus said, it is impossible for a man to learn what he thinks he already knows. When we cling to what's always been, we shut down the very process of learning. We stop listening. We stop asking questions. And when we do that, we stop growing. People use this phrase in all kinds of ways. In families, we've always handled things like this. At work, this is just how we've done it for years. In relationships, that's how I was raised. And slowly, silently, these little phrases start to calcify. They become the emotional and mental armor we wear to avoid confrontation with the unknown. Because adapting means admitting that maybe, just maybe, there's a better way. And for some, that kind of vulnerability feels terrifying. But the Stoics didn't run from that discomfort. They walked into it willingly. They saw challenge as the path to strength. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his Meditations, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." In other words, the moment that feels like friction, that's your moment. That's the call to grow. To ask, does this still serve me? Not everything old is wise. Not everything traditional is timeless. Many people confuse repetition with truth. But just because something is familiar doesn't make it right. Carl Jung once said, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. And that includes accepting the parts of us that have stayed in the same loop for years, not because they worked, but because they were easy." Let's bring this into real life. Think about how many times progress has been delayed by this exact mindset. Civil rights, education, mental health awareness, even gender equality. So many movements had to fight against one sentence, "That's just how it's always been." As if longevity justifies injustice. As if time equals truth. It doesn't. What's old can be wise, or it can be obsolete. Wisdom isn't about preserving the past. It's about questioning it with courage and clarity. You see it in families too. Generational patterns passed down like heirlooms. Anger, silence, shame. People justify toxic behaviors by pointing to lineage. "That's how my parents did it. That's just our family's way." But tradition without reflection becomes a trap. The Stoics believed deeply in self-examination. They didn't just inherit ideas, they tested them. They lived in alignment with values, not customs. Seneca said, It is not because things are difficult that we do not dare. It is because we do not dare that they are difficult. In other words, the thing you fear challenging isn't impossible, it's unfamiliar. But familiarity isn't the same as virtue. There's also a deeper emotional truth hiding inside this phrase. That's how it's always been is often the language of someone who feels powerless. They don't really believe they can change their situation, so they try to normalize it instead. It's a survival instinct. If I can't fix it, I'll defend it. But that kind of thinking eventually eats away at your agency. You stop imagining alternatives. You stop dreaming. You lose your creative power and settle into cycles that quietly break your spirit. And let's not forget how this phrase shows up in our inner lives. Personal habits. Mindsets. I've always had a short fuse. I've always struggled with self-worth. I've always been anxious. These stories may feel like facts, but they're actually scripts, narratives we keep replaying, and every time we say them, we reinforce them. The Stoics believed that we are not our circumstances, we are our judgments of them. So the question isn't, has it always been this way? The question is, do I want it to stay this way? And look, none of this means change is easy. It's not. Growth often feels like loss before it feels like gain. You grieve the familiar, even when it hurt you. You doubt yourself, you slip up. That's part of the deal. But philosophy isn't about perfect answers, it's about better questions. When you hear yourself say, "That's just how it is," pause, breathe, ask, "But does it have to be?" That question alone can open doors. Jung believed that our greatest potential lives in our shadow, the parts of ourselves we've hidden or ignored. He said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." In other words, to grow, you have to confront what's been hiding in plain sight. And often, that's our most deeply held habits. The ones we defend with phrases like, "That's how it's always been." But if you're willing to face that darkness, not with shame but with curiosity, you give yourself the chance to rewrite the story. Imagine what happens when you stop using that phrase, when you start saying things like, "That might have been true before, but it's not anymore," or "We used to do it that way, but I think there's a better option now." Suddenly, you're not just reacting, you're creating, you're not repeating, you're reinventing. And that's where freedom lives, not in keeping things the same, but in choosing what stays and what goes. Because the truth is, every time you repeat a pattern, you deepen its roots. But every time you question it, you loosen its grip. And yes, people might push back. They might call you naive, idealistic, disloyal. That's okay. Change always rattles those who've built their comfort on your conformity. But the Stoic path isn't about pleasing people. It's about living in alignment with truth, even when it's inconvenient, especially then. And that's the invitation here. To trade comfort for clarity. To stop letting history write your future. To remember that just because something has always been doesn't mean it always should be. You have a say. You always have. And maybe today is the day you use it. So, the next time those words start to come out, "That's how it's always been," catch yourself, smile, and then ask, what if this could be different? Because it can, if you're willing to question it, if you're willing to grow, if you're willing to become not who you were told to be, but who you choose to be. 3. I don't care about that. There's a subtle kind of self-destruction that doesn't come through bad habits or loud failures. It shows up in small phrases, quick dismissals, words said offhand that seem harmless in the moment. One of the most dangerous among them is this: "I don't care about that." It slips out of our mouths in conversations we don't understand, in topics we don't feel confident in, or when someone challenges what we already believe. And while it might feel like setting boundaries or saving energy, what it actually signals, beneath the surface, is a mind that's beginning to close. Not because it has nothing left to learn, but because it no longer wants to stretch. That's the first crack. Not in intelligence, but in the will to keep expanding it. Think about it. Curiosity is one of the strongest signs of an engaged, growing mind. Children don't have to be taught to wonder. They ask why 100 times a day. They pull apart the world to see how it works. But somewhere along the way, we start to trade that instinct for certainty. We get tired, distracted, or too proud to admit we don't know something. And instead of saying, "Tell me more," we shrug and say, "I don't care about that." That sentence, it doesn't just end a conversation, it ends the opportunity for learning. It's not a boundary, it's a retreat. The Stoics believed deeply in the practice of curiosity, not idle speculation, but active engagement with the world as it is. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Look well into thyself. There is a source of strength which will always spring up if thou wilt always look." That inward exploration is fueled by the same thing that drives outer curiosity, the desire to know more, to see more, to understand without judgment. Saying "I don't care" is like shutting the window in a room that needs fresh air. It doesn't just block new ideas from coming in, it keeps the stale air circulating. We say we don't care for all kinds of reasons. Sometimes it's insecurity. We don't want to look foolish, so we shut it down before anyone notices we're out of our depth. Sometimes it's fear. A topic makes us uncomfortable, so we pretend it doesn't matter. Sometimes it's arrogance. We believe we've already figured out what's important in life, and anything outside that bubble is a waste of time. But Carl Jung once warned, "Your vision will become clear only when you look into your heart. Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakes." And that awakening requires one essential ingredient: curiosity. There's something else that dies when curiosity dies: connection. When you tell someone, "I don't care about that," what they hear, whether you mean it or not, is, "I don't care about what matters to you." And over time, that wears down relationships. It creates emotional distance. People stop sharing themselves. Conversations lose depth. You become harder to reach, not because you're closed off physically, but because you've stopped participating intellectually and emotionally in the world around you. And it's not just personal relationships. That phrase has professional consequences too. Teams stagnate when no one's curious. Innovation dries up. Companies fail when the culture shifts from "let's explore that idea" to "we don't care about that anymore." Leaders who stop asking questions become tyrants of tradition. Stoicism teaches us to face the world with clarity and courage, not indifference. Epictetus said, "We have 2 ears and 1 mouth so that we can listen twice as much as we speak." Listening isn't just about silence, it's about wanting to understand. So why do people choose apathy? Why say, "I don't care" instead of "I don't know"? Because caring requires energy. It demands openness. It makes you vulnerable. The moment you care, you're exposed. You might be wrong. You might need to change. You might be challenged. And many people would rather coast in boredom than swim in uncertainty. But the cost of that comfort is high. Over time, the habit of not caring becomes a personality. The world becomes smaller. Opinions become louder, even as understanding fades. There's something profoundly courageous about saying, "I don't understand this, but I'd like to." It takes humility. It takes patience. But it also unlocks the mind. It says to the world, "I'm here to grow, not just to survive. I'm not done learning. I'm not too proud to evolve." And that kind of attitude, it ripples outward. It makes conversations richer. It makes you someone people want to talk to, learn from, and open up around. Curiosity is magnetic. Indifference is forgettable. Stoicism isn't about detachment from life. It's about engagement with truth. And truth requires attention. Life is dynamic. The world is always shifting. What made sense 5 years ago might not work today. And if you've stopped caring, you've stopped adapting. You've stopped sharpening the sword that is your mind. And here's the paradox. People who say, "I don't care," often think they're being strong, like they're above it all. But real strength isn't in closing your mind. It's in stretching it. Real strength is being able to sit with uncomfortable ideas and say, "Let me think about that." It's being able to admit, "I haven't considered this before." It's being rooted enough in your values to be open, not threatened by something new. Jung believed that every part of the psyche that we reject, the things we say we don't care about, ends up in the shadow. He said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will rule your life, and you will call it fate." That's what happens when we constantly shut things out. Those rejected thoughts and ideas don't disappear. They just operate in the background, and one day we look around and wonder why our lives feel smaller, flatter, emptier. It's because we've been saying no to too much. Let's make this personal. What have you stopped caring about that used to excite you? What subjects, passions, or conversations have you labeled irrelevant because they made you feel small or uncertain? What have you tuned out? Not because it didn't matter, but because it challenged the version of you that you've gotten used to. Those are the exact places where growth is waiting. "I don't care about that" may feel like armor, but it's really a cage. It keeps you safe, but it also keeps you small. It blocks discomfort, but it also blocks wonder. And wonder is where life begins again. If you want to stay sharp, stay open. If you want to be respected, stay curious. If you want to live fully, care deeply, even when it's easier not to. 4. I don't get all that deep stuff. Have you ever met someone who shuts down the moment a conversation gets even slightly complex? Not because it's irrelevant, not because they're busy, but because the idea makes them feel exposed, confused, or uncomfortable. It's like their brain throws up a wall and says, "Nope, not going there." This isn't about protecting their time or filtering out nonsense. It's something deeper, something rooted in how willing or unwilling they are to be challenged mentally. And that resistance, when left unchecked, becomes a quiet barrier to wisdom. Because avoiding complexity doesn't make life simpler, it makes your thinking smaller. Now, let's get this straight. Simplicity in communication is powerful. Clarity is strength. But when someone rejects all nuance, when they refuse to consider anything that isn't immediately easy or black and white, it's not clarity they're pursuing, it's comfort. And Stoicism at its core is not about comfort, it's about clarity earned through disciplined thought. Epictetus once said, "Only the educated are free." He didn't mean those with fancy degrees. He meant those who have trained their minds to handle contradiction, tension, complexity, and stay grounded in the process. We live in a world that's flooded with information, but very little of it encourages deep thinking. Everything's a headline, a soundbite, a hot take. So it's no surprise that people begin to reject anything that requires real thought. Philosophical questions, emotional layers, moral dilemmas, things that don't come with clean answers. And yet, that's where the real work is. That's where growth lives, not in certainty, but in the willingness to sit with what's unresolved. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The mind that is anxious about future events is miserable." But you can't train the mind to be steady if you never ask it to wrestle with uncertainty. You see this resistance in conversation all the time. You bring up a topic, let's say the nature of consciousness, or the tension between justice and mercy, or the shadow side of ambition, and someone immediately deflects. That's too deep. I don't do all that philosophical stuff. Just tell me what I need to know. And they might laugh it off like it's no big deal. But behind that shrug is often a mind that's quietly afraid. Afraid it won't measure up. Afraid it might be wrong. Afraid of what they'll find if they go one layer deeper. Carl Jung once said, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul." And that includes rejecting abstract thought, because it might expose the very parts of themselves they don't want to examine. But here's the thing, life is abstract. It's layered, complicated. You can't reduce human emotion, morality, or purpose into bite-sized pieces and expect to thrive. There's no clean formula for being a good person, or loving someone well, or finding meaning. That stuff requires reflection. It requires wrestling with contradictions. It requires the kind of thinking that doesn't always lead to answers, but leads to deeper awareness. And that, ironically, is what the people avoiding abstraction are really craving. Not more facts, not more opinions, but understanding. Stoicism was built for this kind of mental weightlifting. It's not just a set of rules, it's a discipline of thought. It asks you to question your judgments, your desires, your fears. It asks you to see what's within your control and what isn't. And that distinction is anything but simple. Seneca said, "If one does not know to which port one is sailing, no wind is favorable." How can you know your destination in life if you've never sat down and asked the bigger questions? What do I value? What am I afraid of? What am I avoiding? Those are abstract questions, and the people who avoid them are not living more efficiently, they're living more reactively. Let's go deeper. Avoidance of complexity doesn't just stunt personal growth, it damages relationships. When someone refuses to think in layers, they struggle to see others in layers too. They label quickly, they judge harshly, they assume motives, and over time, their world becomes a place of binaries, right or wrong, smart or dumb, strong or weak. But people don't fit into neat categories. They're full of contradictions. They change. They have depth. And to understand them, you have to be willing to think beyond the surface. You also see this resistance show up in times of crisis. When the world throws something unexpected your way, loss, failure, betrayal, it's the depth of your thinking that determines your response. If your mind is trained only for simplicity, for easy answers and quick fixes, you'll collapse. You'll fall into blame, victimhood, or denial. But if your mind has been stretched by abstraction, by philosophy, psychology, honest reflection, you'll stand firmer. Not because you like complexity, but because you've learned to navigate it. There's a quiet power in saying, "I don't understand this yet, but I want to." That's the mindset of a truly intelligent person. Not the one who already has the answers, but the one who keeps refining the questions. And that's the core difference between someone who avoids abstract thought and someone who embraces it. One shuts down, the other opens up. One protects their ego, the other pursues truth. And only one of those leads to wisdom. Jung believed that the parts of us we refuse to integrate eventually control us from the shadows. He said, "The shoe that fits one person pinches another. There is no recipe for living that suits all cases." That's exactly why we need abstract thinking. Because there's no one-size-fits-all in life. You need nuance to navigate it. You need flexibility. You need the ability to think outside your personal experience and see how other people might feel, believe, or respond. And that kind of empathy, it's built on complexity. So if you're someone who's avoided those deeper conversations, who feels the urge to shut down whenever things get philosophical or too much, pause. Ask yourself, what am I afraid to confront? Is it that I won't understand? That I'll feel stupid? that I might have to change my beliefs. Those fears are normal, but they're not a reason to stop. They're a reason to start, because on the other side of that discomfort is a stronger, more grounded version of you. And let's be clear, you don't need to become a professor of metaphysics or quote philosophers all day, but you do need to stay open, stay willing, stay humble. The wisest people I know are also the ones who say, "I never stop learning." They don't avoid depth, they seek it, because they know that shallow waters might feel safe, but they don't offer much room to swim. Stoicism gives us a structure to engage with life's biggest questions, not to solve them all, but to live them better, to hold tension without collapsing, to see paradox without panic, to acknowledge uncertainty without losing clarity. And that kind of mental strength, it's built slowly, over time, by choosing not to look away when things get deep. So the next time a conversation goes beneath the surface, don't dismiss it. Lean in, ask a question, listen longer, let your mind stretch. Because thinking abstractly isn't about being fancy or philosophical, it's about being human. It's about making space for everything life throws your way, and still choosing to respond with presence, with principle, and with peace. You don't need to have all the answers, but you do need to be brave enough to ask better questions. That's how a mind grows. That's how clarity is earned. That's how wisdom is built, not by staying safe in simplicity, but by stepping boldly into the layers, and remembering that the depth you fear might just be the door to the life you're meant to live. 5. I deserve better. It's a sentence that sounds empowering on the surface. I deserve better. You'll hear it in breakups, job resignations, even casual complaints. And sure, it's important to know your worth, to have standards, to refuse to settle for less than you're capable of. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Sometimes when people say, I deserve better, what they really mean is, I want more without doing more. It becomes a shield for entitlement, a way to dodge the harder questions like, have I earned what I'm asking for? Or, am I building the kind of life that attracts what I think I deserve? That's where the danger is, not in the desire for better, but in skipping the process it takes to get there. We live in a time where knowing your worth is repeated like a mantra, but worth isn't a feeling. It's a reflection of value, and value is built through effort, discipline, contribution, and character. Just wanting something more doesn't mean you're ready to receive it. Marcus Aurelius said, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one." In other words, stop claiming what you think you're owed and start becoming the kind of person who commands it without needing to shout it. Real worth is quiet. It doesn't need applause. It's felt, not declared. This phrase, I deserve better, often slips out when people are frustrated, when they feel unseen or unappreciated. And those feelings are valid. Sometimes you are in a toxic job, or a draining relationship, or a situation that undervalues you. But the solution isn't to throw your hands up and walk away yelling, I deserve better. The solution is to slow down and ask, have I done my part to raise the standard, internally and externally? Because sometimes it's not that we're in the wrong situation, it's that we haven't risen to meet it. And that's the real work, isn't it? Looking inside, asking the uncomfortable stuff. What are my habits? How do I treat people? Do I bring value or just demand it? Have I shown up consistently or just coasted on potential? Saying I deserve better without doing that inventory is like standing at the top of a mountain you didn't climb and wondering why the view doesn't feel earned. There's no wisdom in entitlement, only illusion. The Stoics were allergic to entitlement. They believed that you only control your character, your actions, your responses, your values. Everything else, optional. Epictetus said, "Don't seek for everything to happen as you wish it would, but rather wish that everything happens as it actually will. Then your life will flow well." That doesn't mean accepting mediocrity. It means understanding that wanting is never enough. You must become worthy of the things you say you want. When people say, "I deserve better," they often mean they want to be recognized. They want to be treated with more respect, paid more, loved more deeply. That's human. But here's the flip side. If you're not treating yourself with discipline and purpose, it's hard to expect the world to do it for you. You teach others how to treat you not just through your boundaries, but through your behavior. When you tolerate your own laziness, shortcuts, excuses, you silently permit others to do the same. It's easy to say, "I deserve better," when you've been hurt or overlooked. What's harder is to follow it up with action, with growth, with proof. Because the truth is, a lot of people overestimate what they're entitled to and underestimate what it takes to get there. It's not malicious. It's a coping mechanism. It protects the ego. But growth doesn't come from protecting the ego. It comes from confronting it. It comes from asking, what do I need to level up, not just escape? Jung said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." And becoming isn't passive. It's not about sitting around waiting for the right job, partner, opportunity to show up. It's about shaping yourself daily into someone who attracts those things, not through force, but through presence, through alignment, and through hard, often invisible work. That's the part no one sees when you say, "I deserve better." The thousands of small choices that actually make you better. Let's not sugarcoat it. It's tempting to blame others for what we don't have. It's easy to point fingers at your boss, your partner, society, fate. But that blame, it keeps you stuck. It robs you of power. The Stoics were relentless about reclaiming that power. Seneca said, "It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more. That is poor." In other words, craving more without embodying more makes you weaker, not stronger. True power is found in mastery over yourself, not the world. And here's the uncomfortable part. Sometimes we don't deserve better yet. Sometimes we're asking for more than we're currently showing up for. And that's not shameful. It's just honest. It's the first step toward growth. You can still want more. You can still aim higher. But the path isn't through loud declarations. It's through quiet discipline, through becoming, through aligning your actions with the life you claim to want. If you're in a place where "I deserve better" keeps echoing in your mind, pause. Don't suppress it, but don't weaponize it either. Ask, what does better look like? Not in vague terms, but in detail. What kind of partner? What kind of work? What kind of environment? Then ask, am I living in a way that reflects those values now? If the answer is no, that's not failure. That's your starting point. The world doesn't owe you anything, but you owe yourself everything. You owe yourself the effort, the clarity, the standards. And yes, sometimes that means walking away. Sometimes "I deserve better" is the hard truth that pushes you to leave what's been holding you back. But make sure that when you walk away, you're walking towards something real, not just away from discomfort. Make sure that better isn't just easier, it's truer, deeper, more aligned. There's nothing wrong with wanting more, but it must come from a place of ownership, not avoidance. It must be rooted in action, not entitlement, because life responds not to what you think you're owed, but to how you show up. Every day, especially on the hard days. So next time the words "I deserve better" rise up, ask yourself, what am I doing to deserve it? And if the answer is not enough yet, that's okay. Start there, build from there, prove it to yourself first. The rest will follow. And remember, it's not about punishing yourself. It's about honoring your potential. It's about taking yourself seriously enough to stop waiting, stop blaming, and start building. Because the better life you want isn't handed to you. It's shaped by you, one choice at a time. And that choice begins now. 6. It's not my fault. There's something oddly satisfying about pointing the finger. When something goes wrong, when a plan fails, when a relationship breaks down, when life doesn't turn out the way we hoped, it feels easier, even instinctive, to look outward and say, it's not my fault. And maybe it isn't. Maybe someone did hurt you. Maybe a system was unfair. Maybe luck really was against you. But the moment you make that your full story, the moment you choose to sit in blame rather than rise in responsibility, you've already given away your power. Because blame might offer temporary relief, but only responsibility offers real control. The Stoics understood this long before self-help became a genre. Epictetus said it best, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." That quote isn't just a feel-good phrase for Instagram, it's a razor-sharp truth about freedom. You don't control what happens in the world, you control how you interpret it, how you carry it, how you respond. And when you blame, you abandon that power. You hand over your agency to the past, to other people, to circumstance. Here's the real trap of blame. It feels like movement, but it's actually stagnation. You think you're doing something by explaining who caused the problem. You think you're gaining clarity by naming the villain. But unless that clarity leads to ownership, you're just spinning in place. You're outsourcing your growth. You're saying, I can't evolve until they change. And that's the fastest way to get stuck in a loop you don't even realize you're in. Carl Jung once wrote, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." That's not easy to hear. It means that the frustration you feel toward others, the unfair boss, the inattentive partner, the absent parent, might actually be a mirror. Not because they're right, but because they're showing you where you still have work to do. Jung wasn't excusing toxic behavior. He was reminding us that self-awareness doesn't start when the world gets peaceful. It starts when we're willing to stop pointing outward and start asking inward. The Stoics didn't live in denial of injustice. They weren't naive. They knew life could be brutal. But their solution wasn't outrage. It was internal structure. That's the whole game. Blame looks outward. Strength looks inward. And the person who owns their response, no matter how unfair the situation, becomes unshakable. But let's not pretend this is easy. Taking responsibility is hard. It means facing your own flaws. It means admitting you may have played a role in what went wrong. It means letting go of the comfortable story where you're always the victim and someone else is always the villain. That story might earn you sympathy, but it will never earn you self-respect. Because deep down, even if you don't say it out loud, you know when you're hiding. You know when you're avoiding the truth of your own contribution. And here's the thing. Responsibility isn't the same as blame. Taking responsibility doesn't mean everything is your fault. It means you've stopped waiting for someone else to fix it. You've stopped giving your energy to things you can't control. You've chosen to focus on what you can shift, your habits, your reactions, your mindset. That shift is where transformation begins. It's where healing begins. And it's the foundation of every form of leadership, from leading others to leading yourself. You want to know what weak people do? They explain. They justify. They tell long stories about why they couldn't, why they shouldn't, why it wasn't their job. Strong people do something different. They say, this is where I am. Here's what I'll do next. No drama, no noise, just forward movement. It's not loud, but it's powerful. Seneca said, "A gem cannot be polished without friction, nor a man perfected without trials. Trials aren't just hardships, they're responsibility tests. They reveal who owns their life and who blames their life. And often the people who talk the most about what's unfair are the ones who've done the least reflection on how they got there. Again, not because they deserve blame, but because they haven't yet seen the strength in ownership. This shows up in everyday life. You miss a deadline. Do you blame your boss for piling too much on, or do you admit you procrastinated? A relationship ends. Do you only talk about how toxic they were, or do you look at your patterns too? You feel stuck in your life. Do you blame the economy, the government, your parents, or do you sit down and ask, what can I do now with what I have? Responsibility is never glamorous. It's not flashy. It doesn't come with instant results or validation, but over time, it becomes your compass. It keeps you steady when things fall apart, because instead of spinning in stories, you're grounded in action. You're building character while others build excuses. You're gaining clarity while others gather blame. And that clarity, that's rare, that's powerful. That's what gives your words weight and your presence influence. Now, here's a secret most people don't talk about. The more you blame others, the more you end up blaming yourself later. Quietly, internally. Because deep down, the soul knows when you've abandoned your power. So if you've been stuck in a loop, waiting for someone to apologize, to recognize you, to change, ask yourself, what part of this am I still holding on to? What part of this am I using to avoid taking the next step? And more importantly, what would it look like if I stopped waiting? Taking responsibility isn't just a mindset shift. It's a life shift. It changes how you handle failure, how you set goals, how you navigate relationships. It teaches you that peace isn't found in control over others. It's found in control over yourself. And once you start living from that place, blame becomes irrelevant. Because the moment something goes wrong, your first question isn't, who did this to me? It's, what can I do now? That question is everything. It opens the door to healing, to growth, to mastery. It's how you move from being a passenger in your own life to being the one who steers. It's how you stop repeating patterns and start creating possibilities. And it's the difference between a person who reacts and a person who responds. The Stoics didn't promise an easy life. They promised a meaningful one. And meaning comes from ownership, from standing in the storm and saying, this may not be my fault, but it's still my path, and I'll walk it with clarity, with strength, and with grace. 7. That's not my job. There's a certain kind of sentence that sounds reasonable when you say it, but slowly eats away at your character when you live by it. One of those sentences is, that's not my job. It feels like a boundary, a defense of fairness, a refusal to be exploited. And sure, sometimes it is appropriate to know your limits, to avoid burnout, to not let yourself be used. But more often than not, this phrase isn't about balance, it's about retreat. It's a quiet way of stepping back when you should be stepping up. And over time, it doesn't just limit what you do, it reshapes who you are. At first, saying, that's not my job, can feel empowering. You draw a line, you define your role, you avoid extra stress. But when that becomes a habit, when it becomes your default reaction to anything outside your comfort zone, you stop being a leader. Not in title, maybe, but in presence. You stop being someone others can rely on. You become invisible, replaceable. Not because you aren't capable, but because you've convinced yourself that effort only matters when it's assigned. The Stoics had a very different view of responsibility. They believed that doing what's right is never someone else's job. It's yours, always. Marcus Aurelius wrote, if it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it. Notice what's missing from that quote, any mention of whose job it is. To the Stoics, character isn't defined by what's on your to-do list. It's defined by what you choose to do when no one's keeping score, and that's where "that's not my job" begins to erode your integrity, not all at once, but slowly, quietly. The more you say it, the more you start to shape a version of yourself who avoids responsibility, who plays small, who only moves when told to. You might not notice it at first, but others will. Your co-workers, your partner, your friends, they feel it when you stop showing up fully. They may not call it out, but they adjust. They start counting you out of things. Trust fades, influence slips away, and before long you're not a leader, you're a checkbox. Carl Jung once said, "You are what you do, not what you say you'll do." And what you do when the task isn't technically yours says more about your character than anything written in a job description. Do you leave it for someone else? Do you pretend not to see it? Or do you take quiet ownership, not because it's required, but because it's right? This isn't just about work, by the way. It shows up at home, in relationships, in communities. "That's not my job" becomes "that's their problem," or "I don't have time for that." And the result is always the same, a slow erosion of connection, contribution, and purpose. Because the truth is, no one feels truly fulfilled just doing the bare minimum. You don't gain pride or meaning from staying inside the lines. You gain it from stepping into moments that ask more of you and choosing to rise. That doesn't mean you become a martyr or say yes to everything. The Stoics weren't doormats. They believed in clarity and discipline, but they also believed in virtue, in stepping up when needed, in carrying more than your share when the situation called for it. Seneca said, "Luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity. Well, service is what happens when integrity meets inconvenience. And leadership is what happens when you stop asking, 'Is this my job?' and start asking, 'Does this need me?'" Now, here's what most people don't realize. The people who go beyond their roles, the ones who take ownership without being asked, those are the ones who become irreplaceable. They earn trust. They become anchors in any environment. And over time they rise, not through self-promotion, but through demonstrated reliability. In a world full of people saying, "That's not my job," the person who quietly says, "I've got this," becomes rare, and rare is valuable. There's another dimension to this that's worth exploring: identity. Every time you say, "That's not my job," you're reinforcing a limited view of yourself. You're boxing in your abilities. You're saying, "I'm only what this role allows me to be." But growth doesn't happen inside job descriptions. It happens in the in-between spaces, in the gaps, in the stretches, in the moments where you're unsure but willing. This mindset isn't just an individual problem, it becomes a cultural one. Workplaces where "that's not my job" is normal are cold, brittle, transactional. Relationships where no one goes above and beyond become hollow. Communities where everyone waits for someone else to act become stagnant. But shift that mindset, even slightly, and everything changes. A team becomes a tribe. A task becomes a mission. A routine becomes a legacy. The Stoics taught that virtue isn't in talk, it's in action. And action isn't always glamorous. Sometimes it's taking out the trash no one asked you to. Sometimes it's fixing a process that everyone else complains about but no one touches. Sometimes it's being the first to apologize, the one to organize, the one who shows up early, stays late, or makes the call. Not because it's your job, but because it needs to be done. And here's the secret. The more you live that way, the more expansive your life becomes. You start to feel pride again. You start to feel connected. Purpose returns. You realize you're not just checking boxes. You're shaping the energy around you. You're becoming someone who leads by example, who brings order where there was chaos, who strengthens the people and spaces you're part of, not for applause, for alignment. Ask yourself, how do you want to be remembered? As someone who did only what was asked, or someone who quietly made things better even when it wasn't required? We all have moments where we want to sit back, do less, pull away. That's human. But greatness, real, meaningful greatness, isn't about doing more for the sake of more. It's about recognizing when a moment calls for you and stepping in. It's about refusing to let your role define your reach. It's about remembering that your influence doesn't begin with a title, it begins with a choice. So maybe the next time you feel that phrase rising, "That's not my job," pause, take a breath, and instead of asking, "Is this required?" ask, "Is this me? Is this the kind of person I want to be? Is this the standard I want to stand for?" Because every action shapes your reputation, and every reputation over time becomes your legacy. Don't let your legacy be built on the bare minimum. Don't be the one who disappears when things get inconvenient. Be the one who stays, who contributes, who leads, even when no one asks, especially when no one notices. Because that's where the real leaders are found, not in job titles, but in quiet acts of responsibility. And if you live that way long enough, you won't have to say you're a leader. You won't have to ask for trust or respect or influence. You'll have earned it. And that's a kind of wealth no one can take from you. The world doesn't need more people doing only what's required. It needs people willing to rise when something needs to be done. And if you're reading this, maybe that person is you. 8. Trust me, I know. We've all met someone who acts like they've got it all figured out. They speak with conviction, interrupt others, throw around opinions like facts, and shut down any disagreement with one quick line. "Trust me, I know." It sounds authoritative, it sounds confident, but very often it's covering something up. The louder someone insists they're right, the more you should wonder what they're trying to hide. Because genuine knowledge doesn't have to shout. It doesn't dominate the room. It listens. It adjusts. It questions itself before anyone else does. Overconfidence, on the other hand, tends to be the opposite. It talks fast, acts sure, and skips over the deep work of real understanding. What's fascinating is that this kind of certainty often comes from ignorance, not expertise. It's a psychological trap called the Dunning-Kruger effect, a cognitive bias where people with limited knowledge overestimate their competence. The less they actually know, the more they believe they know. Meanwhile, those who've done the work, those who've studied deeply, experienced setbacks, questioned their thinking, they're often the most cautious, because they understand the weight of what they don't know. Carl Jung once said, "Thinking is difficult, that's why most people judge." Real thinking, slow, nuanced, humble, is rare. Judgment is easy, certainty is seductive, but wisdom is quieter than we expect. When someone says, "Trust me, I know," what they're often doing is skipping the work of explanation. They don't want to prove it, examine it, or entertain other perspectives. They want to be believed, not challenged. But truth doesn't fear questioning, it invites it. That's the essence of Stoic practice, not clinging to your beliefs, but refining them. Epictetus taught that it's not shameful to admit you don't know something. What's shameful is pretending you do, and in doing so, blocking your own growth. There's something deeply human about wanting to be seen as competent, smart, reliable. No one wants to feel out of their depth. But the real danger begins when you stop being willing to feel out of your depth, because that's where learning happens. The Stoics believed that the beginning of wisdom is the recognition of ignorance. Seneca wrote, "The first step in learning is the desire to learn. You can't desire to learn if you think you already know everything, and that's what makes "trust me, I know" so damaging. It kills the desire. It turns the door to knowledge into a wall. We also need to talk about the subtle insecurity that often hides behind this phrase. People who repeat "I know" may not be trying to fool others as much as they're trying to fool themselves. They want to feel secure. They want to believe they're in control. And so they speak in absolutes because nuance feels like weakness. But the truth is, being comfortable with uncertainty is one of the greatest signs of strength. It means your ego isn't driving the conversation. Your curiosity is. The Stoics would advise us to examine our beliefs the way a blacksmith tests metal, with heat, with pressure, with fire. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "If someone can prove me wrong and show me my mistake, I will gladly change." That's the mark of a real thinker, someone who doesn't protect their pride at the expense of the truth, someone who values understanding over being right. But let's also be honest. In today's world, overconfidence sells, certainty gets likes, opinions go viral. We reward the loudest voice in the room, not the most thoughtful one. That makes it even harder to pause, admit you might be wrong, or say, "I don't know enough to answer that yet." And yet, every time you do, you're reclaiming your integrity. You're building a kind of quiet credibility that lasts long after the noise fades. Because while people are drawn to confidence, they're moved by humility. Let's not confuse humility with weakness, though. Humility doesn't mean doubting yourself constantly or refusing to speak. It means holding your ideas loosely enough that you can adjust them when better ones come along. It means understanding that the world is bigger than your current perspective. Carl Jung emphasized this inner stretch when he said, "A man who has not passed through the inferno of his passions has never overcome them." True understanding, whether of others, of the world, or of yourself, requires going into the fire, not pretending you already stand above it. This is especially important in leadership. The people who lead with "trust me, I know" are often the ones who shut down innovation, stifle creativity, and alienate their team. No one wants to challenge them. No one wants to be honest around them. And over time, the smartest people in the room stop speaking. That's how empires collapse, not through external attack, but through internal arrogance. The Stoics understood the relationship between ego and collapse. They saw that the higher your ego rises, the more fragile you become, the more certain you are, the more blind you become to new truth. So they practiced a kind of mental flexibility. They questioned themselves, they stayed open, and they believed that true wisdom was less about being right and more about being in alignment with what's real. So how do we shift away from this trap? Start small. Replace "I know" with "Here's what I think, but I could be wrong." Say, "I'm still learning about this," instead of pretending you've mastered it. Listen more than you speak. Ask more than you declare. And when someone challenges you, don't defend automatically. Pause, reflect, thank them. Not because you always have to agree, but because you value the process more than the point. And if you catch yourself about to say, "Trust me, I know," pause, ask yourself, am I trying to serve the truth, or am I trying to protect my image? That one question, asked honestly, can shift everything. It can turn a conversation into a discovery. It can open a door where before there was only a wall. Remember, confidence isn't the absence of doubt. It's the ability to move forward even while holding doubt. It's knowing that your knowledge is always incomplete and still choosing to engage with the world honestly, humbly, and fully. Seneca put it beautifully when he said, "While we teach, we learn." Even in moments where you're guiding others, your mind should remain open. The best teachers are still students. The best leaders are still listeners. So if you're on a journey to grow, mentally, emotionally, philosophically, don't rush to be right. Don't cling to certainty like a shield. Let your thoughts be living things. Let your beliefs evolve. Let your understanding deepen not through assertion, but through awareness. The smartest people are rarely the ones who say, "Trust me, I know." They're the ones who say, "Let's explore this together." They don't shut the conversation down. They open it up. And in doing so, they build trust that doesn't have to be demanded. It's simply earned. And that's the kind of person you want to become. Not the loudest in the room, not the most polished, but the most grounded, the most thoughtful, the one who seeks truth over validation, because in the long run, that kind of wisdom always outlasts the noise. 9. Smart people don't talk about their feelings. There's this idea floating around, especially among people who pride themselves on being logical, tough, or unshakable, that talking about feelings is a sign of weakness, that expressing emotions is for people who can't control themselves. You'll hear lines like, "Smart people don't get emotional," or "Keep it together, don't let your feelings show." But here's the truth that often gets buried beneath all that armor. Refusing to talk about your emotions doesn't make you strong. It makes you brittle, because what you suppress doesn't go away. It waits, and eventually it surfaces in ways you didn't expect and can't control. The Stoics are often misunderstood here. People think Stoicism is about being emotionless, like some kind of robotic monk. But that's not it at all. Stoicism is about mastering your emotions, not ignoring them. Marcus Aurelius wrote openly in his meditations about fear, grief, and frustration. He didn't suppress his feelings. He examined them. He gave them a name. Because only when you name something can you begin to understand it. And only when you understand it can you choose your response with wisdom instead of reacting with impulse. We live in a culture that often confuses emotional control with emotional suppression. We tell boys from a young age, "Man up." We tell professionals to leave it at the door. We tell ourselves to push through. And sure, there's value in discipline. There's value in being able to pause and choose your response. But there's a difference between pausing and pretending. Suppression isn't strength. It's silence dressed up as discipline. Real strength? It looks different. It looks like someone who can say, "Yeah, I'm feeling overwhelmed right now, and I need a moment to process." Or, "That hurt me more than I expected, and I want to understand why." Or even, "I've been holding something in, and I think it's time to talk about it." That kind of honesty takes far more courage than staying quiet ever will. It's easy to bottle things up. It's much harder to bring them into the light. Stoic philosopher Seneca wrote, "No man is more unhappy than he who never faces adversity, for he is not permitted to prove himself." What if we applied that to emotional adversity? What if emotional discomfort, grief, confusion, fear, wasn't a threat, but an opportunity? Not a flaw in your character, but a forge for it. That's how the Stoics saw challenge. And emotional challenge is no exception. It's important to say this plainly. Being emotionally aware doesn't mean you're overly sensitive or fragile. It means you know what's happening inside you. You don't let your feelings control you, but you don't ignore them either. You observe them. You learn from them. You give yourself the same curiosity you'd offer a close friend. And that curiosity becomes a kind of power. Because now, instead of reacting to your emotions unconsciously, you can respond to them with clarity. Jung also said, "Emotion is the chief source of all becoming." In other words, emotion isn't just a messy part of being human, it's the fuel behind growth. If you've ever made a real change in your life, chances are it started with an emotion. Maybe it was anger that pushed you to set boundaries. Maybe it was grief that taught you what really matters. Maybe it was love that softened your edges. Those weren't distractions from your path. They were the path, but only if you paid attention. And here's something rarely talked about: breath. The ones who can say, "This is hard for me too, but we're going to move through it together." That's not weakness. That's resilience. That's the kind of presence that creates safety for others and for yourself. Stoicism also teaches us about the impermanence of all things, emotions included. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, "The things you think about determine the quality of your mind." If you think your emotions are shameful, you'll bury them. If you believe they are natural signals, like hunger or fatigue, you'll start listening. You'll treat them as feedback, not failures. And when you do that, your inner life starts to feel less chaotic, not more. Let's be clear. Emotions are not the enemy. They're messengers. They point you toward unmet needs, unresolved pain, unspoken truths. Ignoring them is like ignoring the check engine light in your car. You might keep driving for a while, but eventually something breaks. And often, the people who believe they're being strong by staying silent are the ones carrying the heaviest emotional damage. Not because they're weak, but because they've never been taught a better way. Carl Jung believed that wholeness, not perfection, was the goal of life. He said, "I'd rather be whole than good." Being whole means integrating all parts of yourself, including the ones you were taught to hide, including your emotional self. It means accepting that you can be both logical and feeling, thoughtful and uncertain, composed and moved. Not either or, both and. So what do we do with all of this? First, notice your patterns. Do you avoid certain emotions? Do you shut down or change the subject when things get uncomfortable? Just observe. No judgment. Second, start putting language to what you feel, even if it's messy, even if it sounds clumsy. Say it out loud to yourself, write it down, or share it with someone you trust. The goal isn't to be poetic, it's to be real. Third, start small. You don't need to turn into an open book overnight. But maybe the next time someone asks how you're doing, you pause and answer honestly, even just a little more than usual. And if that voice inside you still whispers, talking about feelings is weakness, remind it. Stoic strength isn't about hiding, it's about mastering. And you can't master what you're unwilling to face. The person who can look their emotions in the eye, feel them fully, and still choose to act with discipline, that's someone who's truly in control. You don't need to wear a mask to be respected. You don't need to be stoic in the wrong sense to be taken seriously. You just need to be honest enough with yourself to see emotion not as an enemy, but as a teacher. Because in the end, it's not emotional silence that makes you wise. It's emotional integrity. It's being grounded enough to stay open, steady enough to stay soft, and courageous enough to speak, even when your voice shakes. That's real strength. That's real intelligence. And that's the kind of life that doesn't just survive. It expands, with every word, with every feeling, with every truth told. 10. I couldn't help it. We've all been there. A moment hits, emotions run high, something spills out of your mouth or your actions, and before you even take a breath, you've already said it. I couldn't help it. Maybe it was an outburst. Maybe it was silence when you should have spoken. Maybe it was a decision you regret. But instead of owning it, we cling to this phrase like a shield. It sounds innocent, even relatable. After all, who hasn't felt overwhelmed by emotion? But when it becomes your go-to explanation, your default defense, something deeper is happening. What you're actually doing is dodging responsibility. You're saying, it wasn't me, it was the feeling. And while that might feel easier in the moment, over time, it chips away at your self-respect. and your personal power. Here's the truth. Emotions are real, powerful, sometimes overwhelming, but they're not uncontrollable. You are not a passenger in your own mind, helplessly driven by every feeling that appears. And the Stoics knew this better than anyone. They didn't believe in killing emotion. They believed in commanding it. Epictetus said, "Any person capable of angering you becomes your master. If your emotions control your behavior, then whoever or whatever triggered them controls you." That's not freedom. That's slavery dressed up as passion. When someone says, "I couldn't help it," they're often trying to protect their ego from guilt. It's a way of softening the blow, of avoiding the discomfort of admitting you had a choice and made the wrong one. But accountability doesn't mean you're a bad person. It means you're an honest one. Taking responsibility for how you react under pressure doesn't make you weak, it makes you trustworthy. And the people around you, whether in relationships, friendships, or work, feel that difference. Carl Jung wrote, "What you resist not only persists, but will grow in size. When you avoid looking at how your emotions shape your behavior, they don't disappear. They get stronger, they dig deeper, and eventually they become habits, patterns that you don't even question anymore. You start saying, 'That's just how I am,' instead of, 'This is something I can work on.' You normalize losing control, and in doing so, you give up the chance to actually grow. But here's the key. Emotional intelligence isn't about being emotionless. It's about awareness. It's being able to feel anger without lashing out, to feel fear without running away, to feel sadness without crumbling. It's choosing your response instead of reacting by default. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Notice that word, power. It's not passive. It's not reactive. It's deliberate. And that power shows up in those exact moments where you feel like saying, "I couldn't help it." Let's get practical for a second. Say you're in an argument. Emotions are flaring. You feel cornered, misunderstood, hurt. Your first instinct is to defend, attack, maybe even say something cruel. You justify it in your head. "I had to say that. They pushed me." But later, when things cool down, you realize you did have a choice. You just didn't use it. That gap, the space between stimulus and response, is where growth lives. And each time you choose presence over impulse, that gap gets wider. And what's wild is this. The more often you pause and choose your response, the more natural it becomes, the stronger you get. Emotional self-control isn't something you're born with or without. It's a muscle. It gets built through awareness, repetition, and sometimes failure. Seneca once said, "Most powerful is he who has himself in his own power." That's the kind of power that lasts, not the loud, dramatic kind, the quiet, stable kind, the kind that doesn't need to say, "I couldn't help it," because it's already owned the moment. But let's be fair. Some emotions really do feel overwhelming, especially if you've never been taught how to handle them. Maybe you grew up in a family that never talked about feelings, or one where emotional explosions were normal. Maybe no one ever modeled calm under pressure. If that's the case, your first reaction might honestly feel automatic, but even that doesn't mean you're helpless. Carl Jung believed that everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. That discomfort you feel when your emotions get tested, it's not a flaw, it's a mirror, an invitation to dig deeper. And this is where the Stoic perspective becomes so powerful. The Stoics didn't say, "Never feel anything." They said, "Don't let anything unexamined dictate your life." They practiced premeditatio malorum, visualizing difficult situations in advance so they could prepare their mind. They journaled their thoughts. They reflected on their reactions. They trained for hardship, not just physically, but emotionally. And that training made them resilient, not because they didn't feel, but because they didn't flee from what they felt. You can start doing the same thing. You can build that inner pause. Begin by recognizing your patterns. When do you tend to say, "I couldn't help it"? What are the emotional triggers that keep owning you? Anger, insecurity, shame. Start writing them down, tracking them, not to judge yourself, but to free yourself. Because once you see the pattern, you're no longer at its mercy. You can interrupt it, you can change it, you can choose differently. Also, remind yourself, you are not your emotions. They are a part of your experience, not the whole of who you are. And if you've spent years reacting automatically, you might feel guilt when you start seeing the damage it caused. That's okay. Guilt, when used wisely, becomes a compass, not a punishment, but a teacher. It tells you what matters, what you want to protect, what kind of person you actually want to be. Because in the end, emotional responsibility isn't about perfection, it's about direction. Are you moving toward awareness, toward mastery, toward deeper self-respect? Or are you using feelings as an excuse to stay stuck? You get to decide every single day. So next time you feel that phrase rising, "I couldn't help it," pause. Ask yourself, what if I could? What if I had more choice than I thought? What if I'm not powerless, but just unpracticed? And what would it look like to start practicing right now? You don't have to become stoic overnight, but you can become someone who doesn't collapse under emotion, who feels fully, responds wisely, and walks away from situations with your dignity intact. That's real emotional intelligence, not denying what you feel, but refusing to let it define you. And when you start living that way, people notice. You become the calm in chaos, the one others trust when everything else feels uncertain, not because you're always right, but because you're responsible. You don't hide behind feelings. You stand beside them, you honor them, you direct them. That's what Stoicism teaches us. That true freedom isn't about escaping emotion, it's about engaging it with integrity. So stop saying, "I couldn't help it." Start saying, "I felt it, I understood it, and I chose my response." That's power, that's progress, and most of all, that's yours to own. 11th. It is what it is. Sometimes the most dangerous ideas hide inside the calmest words. At first glance, "it is what it is" sounds peaceful, detached, even a little wise. It gives off the impression that you're above it all, that you've accepted the world as it comes and moved on. And in some cases, that's true. Sometimes this phrase does reflect hard-won wisdom. Sometimes it means you've finally let go of something you can't control, and that's a beautiful thing. But other times, more often than we'd like to admit, it's not wisdom, it's resignation. It's the verbal equivalent of shrugging your shoulders and quietly backing away from life. It's a mask we wear to avoid responsibility, reflection, or action. The tricky part is that it's hard to tell the difference on the surface. "It is what it is" can come from two very different places. One is rooted in strength, the kind of strength that comes from facing reality, grieving your illusions, and choosing to focus on what you can influence. That's the Stoic way. But the other place? That comes from exhaustion, from fear, from the slow erosion of hope. That version of "it is what it is" quiet defeat. It's when someone has stopped asking questions, stopped challenging themselves, stopped trying to improve what could still be changed. And that mindset doesn't bring peace, it brings decay. Stoicism isn't about accepting everything, it's about accepting what's beyond your control and acting with excellence within what's still in your hands. It draws a clear line between surrender and passivity. One is active, the other is lazy. And if we're not careful, this little phrase, "it is what it is," can become the mantra of the mentally checked out. There's something comforting about not caring, about letting go of responsibility, especially when life feels overwhelming. But comfort is a poor substitute for meaning, and this phrase, when overused, starts to chip away at the very thing that gives your life momentum, your ability to respond, to adapt, to engage, to push back when needed. Let's be clear, acceptance is a part of wisdom. When something is truly beyond your influence, like the past, the actions of others, the weather, death, then yes, accept it. Carry it with grace. Don't waste your strength fighting what you cannot change, but don't confuse that with situations where you still have agency. Don't let the phrase become a sedative that dulls your ambition or your self-respect. You see it everywhere. Someone stuck in a job they hate but refuses to look for a new one. It is what it is. A person stuck in the same cycle of poor habits but doesn't want to change. It is what it is. Relationships on autopilot, finances neglected, potential ignored, all waved away with those 5 words. But deep down, people know. They know when they're using that phrase to justify staying small. The Stoics talked a lot about the discipline of perception, choosing how you see things. That doesn't mean lying to yourself or pretending things are better than they are. It means refusing to let your circumstances dictate your spirit. Seneca wrote, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it." That waste often comes from passive acceptance, from defaulting to inaction instead of questioning how else we could approach a challenge. What's more empowering is to ask a better question when "it is what it is" starts to surface. Try, but what could it become? That little shift opens a door. It reminds you that while you can't control everything, you can always influence something, even if it's just your attitude, your next move, the tone you bring to the table. That small piece of agency, that's where life gets its spark back. If you've had a rough life, if you've been hurt, disappointed, overlooked, it makes sense that surrender might feel safer than hope. But you're not your setbacks. You're not your past. You're not stuck unless you choose to be. There's also a deeper philosophical danger to this mindset. When we start using "it is what it is" too often, we become numb to injustice. We stop fighting for change. We start accepting broken systems, toxic environments, or mediocre leadership, not because we believe it's right, but because we've lost the will to care. That's not wisdom, that's erosion. And the more we tolerate, the more we teach others that it's acceptable. That's how cultures decay, slowly, one shrug at a time. Now, let's bring this home. Ask yourself honestly, when you say "it is what it is," are you releasing what you can't control or avoiding what you can? Are you practicing stoic detachment or just emotionally checking out? There's no shame in admitting you've defaulted to the latter. We all do it sometimes. But the growth starts when you get real with yourself. When you look at an area of your life you've labeled as just the way it is and ask, is that really true? Maybe your relationship isn't dead. It just needs your full presence again. Maybe your work isn't meaningless. You've just stopped bringing your values to it. Maybe your goals aren't unreachable. You've just been telling yourself a story that lets you off the hook. Those shifts don't require perfection. They require participation. And that begins when you replace passive phrases with active ones. Instead of "it is what it is," try "here's where I am. What's next? I didn't choose this, but I choose my response." This is hard, but it's not over. The Stoics believed in radical responsibility, not to control everything out of wisdom, but out of fear. 12th, let me finish. We all know that one person who never really listens. You can see it in their eyes, just waiting for you to stop talking so they can say what's on their mind. They interrupt, talk over you, dismiss what you've just said with a quick, "yeah, but," and steamroll the conversation like it's a competition instead of a connection. And what's worse is, they often don't even realize they're doing it. In their mind, they're contributing, leading, holding court. But to everyone else, it feels like being bulldozed. Because when someone talks without listening, they're not sharing, they're performing, they're proving, and underneath that noise is usually one thing: ego trying to be heard louder than understanding. It's easy to fall into this trap, especially when we're passionate, defensive, or convinced we're right. But talking without listening doesn't just make communication harder. It makes relationships shallow. You can't build trust if the other person never feels heard. You can't grow if you're too busy trying to win every conversation. You can't lead if your words drown out everyone else's insights. The Stoics understood this well. Wisdom often lives in the space we're not filling. The problem is, we live in a world that rewards the loudest voice. Social media thrives on hot takes. Debates are won by dominance, not understanding. Even in our daily lives, we're taught to argue, defend, and be quick on our feet. But the most impactful people, the ones who really change things, aren't the loudest. They're the ones who listen first, speak last, and speak only when it matters. They make others feel seen, and that's not a soft skill, it's power. Carl Jung once said, "Knowing your own darkness is the best method for dealing with the darkness of other people." But how can we know anyone else's darkness, or even our own, if we don't stop and listen? When you cut someone off, even with good intentions, you're telling them, "What I have to say matters more than what you're saying." Maybe you don't mean to, maybe you're just excited or trying to relate, but intent doesn't erase impact. And over time, the impact of not listening becomes disconnection. And here's something you may not realize. People remember how you listen more than they remember what you said. Think back. Some of the most healing moments in your life probably didn't come from someone giving you advice. They came from someone sitting with you, nodding, saying, "I hear you." No fixing, no judgment, just presence. That kind of listening, open, curious, patient, is a rare and beautiful gift. And it's the exact opposite of what happens when we dominate the conversation. When you truly listen, you make room for growth. Not just in others, but in yourself. Because every time you step back and give someone else space, you're exposing yourself to a new perspective, a different worldview, a story you might never have considered. That doesn't mean you have to agree with everything, but the act of listening itself expands your understanding. Seneca wrote, "You learn to know a pilot in a storm, a soldier in the battle." And I'd argue, you learn to know a wise person in a disagreement, not by how well they talk, but by how well they listen. Let's be honest, listening takes discipline, it takes humility. It requires you to set aside your need to be right, or impressive, or heard. And that's not easy, especially when emotions are high. But that's also where your character gets tested. In the heat of a tense conversation, can you pause? Can you hear the message beneath someone's tone? Can you sit with discomfort long enough to let someone finish before you jump in? That's not just good communication, that's Stoic mastery. Stoicism is built on self-command, not the suppression of emotion, but the intentional directing of it. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Let your one delight and refreshment be to pass from one service to the community to another, with God ever in mind." In modern terms, your purpose isn't to overpower, it's to serve, to contribute. And that starts with understanding, which begins with listening. When you walk into a conversation with the intention to understand rather than to dominate, everything changes. The energy shifts, people open up, conflict softens, and connection deepens. Interrupting, dismissing, steamrolling. That's ego in motion, and ego always wants to be seen more than it wants to see. But when you let go of that need, something powerful happens. Your words start to carry more weight. Because they're not constant. They're not frantic. They're considered. They come from a deeper place. And when you do speak, people listen, because they've felt your presence long before they've heard your voice. Carl Jung also said, "The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed." But transformation doesn't happen when one voice dominates. It happens in the exchange, in the back and forth, in the stillness between sentences. And if you don't let that happen, if you're always cutting people off, redirecting the topic, waiting for your turn to speak, you're missing the alchemy. Now, this doesn't mean you never speak up, or that you become passive in every conversation. It means you learn to respond instead of react. You slow down, you leave space, you listen not to reply, but to understand. And in that space, something rare happens. People feel safe, seen, respected. That kind of communication builds bonds that last. That kind of presence earns real influence. So if you find yourself always jumping in, always steering the conversation, always waiting for your turn, pause. Ask yourself, what am I trying to prove? And more importantly, what am I afraid to hear? Because often, the need to dominate a conversation comes from a fear of vulnerability, a fear that someone else's truth might challenge your own. But that's exactly the kind of challenge that makes you stronger, wiser, more whole. This isn't just about being polite. It's about being effective. Great leaders listen. Great friends listen. Great thinkers listen. Not because they're unsure of themselves, but because they are. They know their value isn't diminished by silence. It's deepened. They know that understanding others doesn't weaken their own perspective. It sharpens it, makes it more compassionate, more complete. The Stoics would remind us that every interaction is a chance to live by your values, not just when you're calm, but especially when you're challenged. So the next time you're in a conversation, slow down, breathe, make space, practice listening as a form of discipline, a form of service, a form of strength. 13. I just say what's on my mind. There's a kind of pride people sometimes wear like a badge. This idea that saying whatever pops into your head without a filter is a sign of honesty. You'll hear someone say it with a grin, like they're bragging, "I just say what's on my mind." As if that makes them real, raw, or brave. But let's take a step back. Is that really courage? Or is it just undisciplined speech pretending to be authenticity? Because when you strip it down, speaking without thinking doesn't make you honest. It makes you impulsive. And in a world already full of noise, that's not strength. That's just more chaos. See, there's a difference between being honest and being blunt. Honesty is rooted in clarity and care. It speaks the truth, but it does so in a way that considers impact. Bluntness, the kind that says, "I just tell it like it is," often skips over thoughtfulness. It values being heard more than being understood. It assumes that if a thought exists, it must be said. But here's what the Stoics would tell you. Not every thought deserves a voice. Not every emotion should drive action. Words are powerful. They can inspire, teach, comfort, but they can also wound, confuse, and destroy trust. And impulsive speech, the kind that comes out before the brain has caught up, usually ends up somewhere in the second category. That kind of speech isn't communication, it's release. It's dumping emotion into the room and calling it realness. But realness without responsibility is just recklessness. And recklessness may feel good for a moment, but it usually costs more than it gives. So when we feel the urge to blurt something out, especially when it's reactive, it's worth asking, why am I saying this right now? Is it to connect or to defend? To clarify or to impress? To speak truth or to relieve some pressure I don't want to face? Because once you ask that question, you start to realize how often our words are driven not by wisdom, but by ego, by emotion, by unprocessed thoughts we haven't taken the time to examine. Now, we all say things we regret. That's human. But if "I just say what's on my mind" becomes your default, then what you're really saying is, "I don't take responsibility for my words." And that's not freedom. That's emotional laziness. Because thinking before speaking isn't censorship. It's maturity. It's recognizing that words aren't just about expression, they're about connection. And connection can't happen when one person is broadcasting and the other is just surviving the noise. Let's talk about relationships. In every meaningful connection, whether it's with a friend, partner, colleague, your words shape the emotional climate. One reckless comment can undo hours of trust. One careless remark can hang in the air for days, and the damage isn't always visible. Sometimes it's a subtle retreat, a pulling back, a shift in how safe someone feels with you. And over time, those little moments of thoughtless speech add up, until one day someone decides you're not worth the risk of being vulnerable with anymore. Now ask yourself, is that really who you want to be? The person who speaks quickly and watches people slowly back away? Or do you want to be someone whose words mean something, not because you say everything, but because you say the right things with the right heart? Most impulsive speech comes from the unconscious, the stuff we haven't sat with, haven't owned, haven't healed. We think we're just being honest, but really, we're offloading inner tension. So if you want to change your words, start by changing your awareness. Notice what you feel before you speak. Ask, is this feeling mine? Is it fresh or is it old? Is it truth or just a reaction? And once you start doing that, something incredible happens. You begin to slow down, not in a forced or robotic way, but in a wise, grounded way. You start choosing your words the way a sculptor chooses each strike of the chisel. You say less, but what you say hits deeper. People lean in because your presence carries weight. You become someone others can trust with hard conversations, not because you're loud or raw, but because you're intentional. And in a world addicted to instant expression, intention becomes rare and therefore powerful. The Stoics also believed in the discipline of assent, the practice of not immediately agreeing with your own thoughts. Just because you feel something doesn't mean it's true. Just because a sentence forms in your head doesn't mean it deserves air. Seneca wrote, "It is a great thing to know the season for speech and the season for silence." And knowing that season is what separates emotional maturity from emotional noise. This doesn't mean you muzzle yourself. It means you raise your standard. You speak with clarity, with awareness, with the goal of adding value, not just unloading emotion. It means learning the power of pause, the power of saying, "Let me think about that before I answer." Or, "I feel strongly, but I want to be careful how I say this." These aren't weak moves. They're signs of strength, of someone who respects their voice and the ears receiving it. You also start realizing that not every opinion needs to be spoken. Not every feeling needs to be verbalized in real time. Some things are better written down. Some things are better left to cool. Some things are better reshaped through self-reflection before being shared. And once you get used to that inner filtering, you begin to see the difference between real authenticity and just emotional dumping. Here's the thing. Authenticity doesn't mean saying everything you feel the second you feel it. It means aligning your words with your values, with your deepest principles. It means being real and responsible, honest and aware, grounded and expressive, not either or, both and. And when you master that blend, when you learn to channel your thoughts instead of spilling them, your presence becomes sharper, calmer, and far more respected. So if you've been using the phrase, "I just say what's on my mind," as a kind of shield or excuse, it's time to upgrade. Trade it for something wiser. Try, "I think carefully about what I say because I know it matters." Or, "I value honesty, but I speak it with care." That doesn't make you fake. It makes you a better communicator, a better leader, a better human. Because in the end, you don't want to be remembered as the one who always spoke up without thinking. You want to be remembered as the one who made others feel heard, understood, respected. And that kind of legacy isn't built through volume, it's built through intention. The next time a strong thought rises up and you feel the impulse to let it fly, pause, breathe, ask, what's the deeper truth here? What's the kindest way to express it? And if there's no way to say it that adds value, maybe it's not time yet. Maybe it's still cooking. That's not repression. That's wisdom in progress. 14. Take it or leave it. There's a certain phrase that gets thrown around like it's a sign of confidence. Take it or leave it. You'll hear it when someone's criticized, when they're asked to adjust, or when a relationship hits a friction point. And at first glance, it sounds bold, like someone who knows who they are and won't bend for anyone. But when you scratch beneath the surface, take it or leave it isn't strength. It's resistance. It's a wall built around ego, disguised as self-respect. And the real cost of that wall? Growth. Because the moment someone stops being willing to evolve, they stop being someone you can truly connect with, learn from, or build anything lasting alongside. Here's the paradox. People who say, take it or leave it, often think they're being honest, that they're just keeping it real. But there's a huge difference between authenticity and stagnation. Authenticity is being true to your values while still being open to change. Stagnation is being rigid, stuck in a version of yourself that's more about defense than depth. The Stoics, who were masters of inner strength, never celebrated inflexibility. They pursued constant self-examination. The problem with take it or leave it is that it ends the conversation before it even starts. It signals that you're done listening, done growing, done questioning yourself. And that's dangerous, not just for relationships, but for your own inner evolution. Because no matter how old, experienced or accomplished you are, the minute you stop adapting, you start decaying. That's not dramatic, it's reality. Seneca wrote, "As long as you live, keep learning how to live." That's the Stoic mindset. Life as a school, self-awareness as a practice, not a destination. Think about how this shows up in real life. A partner says, "You don't listen to me," instead of asking, "What do you need me to hear?" The answer is, "This is how I am. Take it or leave it." A friend brings up a repeated behavior that's hurtful, and instead of engaging, you fire back with, "Then don't be around me." A boss gives constructive feedback, and the response is, "That's not my style." All of it sounds firm, but underneath, it's fear. The fear of looking at yourself, the fear of admitting you could do better. Nobody wants to keep knocking on a door that never opens. Eventually, people stop trying, and what you thought was strength becomes isolation. This isn't just about relationships either. It shows up in personal goals, in professional life, in creativity. The artist who refuses to evolve their craft because this is how I do it. The employee who resists every new system with "that's not my way." The person who walks away from growth opportunities because they'd rather protect their ego than risk learning something new. Take it or leave it becomes a comfort zone masquerading as clarity. Let's bring this back to Stoicism. The Stoics taught that the self isn't something fixed, it's something you work on daily. Marcus Aurelius literally wrote to himself every morning in meditations, questioning his impulses, his actions, his motives. He didn't sit on his throne saying, "This is who I am, deal with it." He asked, "How can I better align my actions with virtue?" That's real strength. Not in refusing to change, but in being committed to the right kind of change. And we're not talking about bending for everyone or losing your core. That's not growth, that's people-pleasing. What we're talking about is discernment, the ability to recognize when feedback is actually a gift, when discomfort is a sign of expansion, when someone's challenge to your behavior isn't an attack, but an invitation. It's easy to say, "No one gets to change me." It's harder, and much more courageous, to say, "I'm willing to explore whether I need to change myself." If you're always the same person in every context, if you never evolve, never reflect, never adapt, ask yourself, is that consistency or is that fear? Because staying the same isn't noble if the version you're defending isn't your best self. Jung wrote, "Your visions will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakes." That awakening requires you to drop the shield of take it or leave it and replace it with curiosity. Curiosity about who you're becoming, about how others experience you, about what's possible beyond the version of yourself you've always known. That curiosity doesn't weaken you, it sharpens you. It says, "I know I'm valuable, but I also know I'm not finished." And that mindset, that's magnetic. That's what makes someone a lifelong learner, a better friend, a stronger partner, a more trusted leader. Now here's the other piece. Take it or leave it doesn't just shut people out. It shuts you in. It keeps you stuck in the same patterns, the same thoughts, the same emotional loops. And over time, that stagnation becomes a kind of spiritual numbness. You stop feeling challenged. You stop surprising yourself. Life becomes a cycle of sameness, not because the world lacks opportunity, but because you've closed the door on anything that requires self-awareness. The Stoics warned us of this. They believed that the greatest danger wasn't failure, it was comfort without reflection. Comfort that calcifies your mind. That makes you stubborn instead of resilient, proud instead of principled. And that's what take it or leave it really means. I already know. I'm not open. I'm done learning. That's not a life philosophy. That's a dead end. So how do we shift out of that mindset? First, notice when you're tempted to say it. What's triggering that defensiveness? What are you protecting? Second, ask yourself, is this really about staying true to my values, or is it about staying safe in my patterns? There's a huge difference. Third, replace take it or leave it with something more open. Try. This is where I'm at right now, but I'm open to learning. Or, I may not agree, but I want to understand your perspective. That doesn't make you weaker, it makes you wiser. And finally, don't be afraid to outgrow your old self. The version of you that needed to say, take it or leave it, might have served a purpose once. Maybe it protected you, maybe it helped you survive. But now, you're ready for more, for better, for deeper. And that requires you to say, I am a work in progress, and that's a beautiful thing. 15. People are too sensitive. Sometimes, when we don't want to deal with the emotional impact of our words or actions, we reach for the easy label, people are just too sensitive. It's quick, dismissive, and at first glance it feels like a power move, like you're the level-headed one in a world that's just too fragile. But look a little closer, and you'll see it for what it really is, a defense. a wall thrown up to avoid reflection, empathy, and sometimes even growth. Because when someone says, "People are too sensitive," what they're often saying underneath is, "I don't want to take responsibility for how I made you feel." Let's be clear, yes, there are times when people overreact. We've all seen moments where emotions spiral, but that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the tendency to dismiss people's feelings altogether, to label any emotional reaction as weakness. That mindset isn't strong, it's limited. It cuts off the possibility of real understanding, of deep connection. It's not about being tough, it's about being emotionally unavailable. And that's not wisdom, that's avoidance. The Stoics, often misunderstood as being cold or detached, actually emphasized the opposite. They taught us to observe our emotions and the emotions of others, not to ignore them. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Whenever you are about to find fault with someone, ask yourself the following question: what fault of mine most nearly resembles the one I am about to criticize?" In other words, before you call someone too sensitive, maybe ask, why does their reaction bother me so much? What am I unwilling to look at in myself? Because more often than not, calling someone too sensitive is just a way to shut down the conversation. It keeps us from having to examine how we communicate, how our words land, or whether we've actually caused harm. It allows us to stay wrapped in our own narrative, rather than doing the harder work of listening, reflecting, and maybe, just maybe, adjusting our behavior. So when someone's emotional response feels excessive to you, pause. Don't just react. Ask, what are they trying to protect? What matters to them that I might be missing? That doesn't mean you have to walk on eggshells, but it does mean you step into the conversation with a little more awareness, a little more curiosity, and a lot more humility. And let's flip the script for a moment. What if the person who's too sensitive is actually just more in touch with something you haven't fully processed in yourself? What if their emotion is a mirror you don't want to look into? The Stoics believed that discomfort was the gateway to growth. It's also worth noting that calling people too sensitive rarely leads to clarity. It just shuts people down. It makes them feel small, defensive, invalidated. And when people feel that way, they don't open up more. They shut off, they withdraw, and eventually they stop trusting you. Because emotional safety is the foundation of real connection. If people feel like they have to armor up around you, you've already lost the depth that makes relationships meaningful. Seneca wrote, "Wherever there is a human being, there is an opportunity for kindness." That includes in how you respond to emotion, especially the kind you don't understand. Because kindness doesn't mean agreeing with everyone. It means giving people the benefit of the doubt. It means assuming that if someone is hurt, there's something real there worth exploring. And if you can sit with that discomfort, rather than rejecting it, you become someone who can hold space, not just for others, but for yourself too. The truth is, we all want to be understood. We all want to feel like our emotions matter. So when you dismiss someone else's sensitivity, you're not just ignoring them, you're reinforcing a world where vulnerability is punished. And in doing so, you rob both of you of something deeper, the chance to truly see each other. Carl Jung also said, "The shoe that fits one person pinches another. There is no recipe for living that suits all cases." Sensitivity isn't a flaw, it's a language, and learning to speak it doesn't weaken you, it deepens you. Let's talk about power for a moment, because a lot of people think being unaffected is powerful. That staying cool, no matter what, is a sign of strength. But real power isn't in staying untouched. It's in staying open, in being present enough with yourself that you can sit with someone else's pain, confusion, or fear without needing to shut it down. That's Stoic endurance, not coldness, but composure with compassion. Marcus Aurelius didn't write, "Don't feel." He wrote, "If it is endurable, then endure it." Stop complaining. That includes enduring difficult emotions, not ignoring them. And let's be honest, emotional intelligence is the currency of healthy relationships. It's what allows you to navigate conflict, build trust, and actually get better over time. People who constantly say others are too sensitive often find themselves surrounded by silence, not because people agree with them, but because people stop trying, they stop sharing, they stop caring. And in the absence of feedback, those same people often wonder, why do my relationships feel shallow? The answer isn't in other people, it's in the wall they've built around themselves. If we zoom out even more, we can see how this mentality feeds bigger problems. In workplaces, it creates toxic cultures where no one feels safe speaking up. In families, it creates generations of emotional disconnection. In society, it reinforces divisions where empathy is replaced with judgment, all starting with one dismissive phrase: people are too sensitive. But we can do better. We can start asking better questions. Instead of saying, "Why are they so sensitive?" try, "What are they trying to protect?" Or, "What might they be carrying that I can't see?" That doesn't mean you agree with everything, but it means you show up with humility, with the willingness to understand before you react, with the maturity to say, maybe there's more to this than what I'm seeing. Because here's the truth, sensitivity isn't weakness, it's signal. It tells us where the wounds are, where the values live, where the edges of understanding begin. And if we stop rejecting it, we can start using it. We can start learning from it. And that's how you grow, not by hardening yourself, but by expanding your awareness. So next time you hear yourself about to say, "People are too sensitive," pause. Ask yourself, am I actually being honest or just avoiding discomfort? Is this about them or about me not wanting to adjust? And if you're willing to go there, to ask that hard question, then you've already begun the kind of growth most people avoid. The Stoics weren't anti-emotion, they were anti-sloppiness. They believed in clarity, control, and depth. They practiced stillness not to escape life, but to engage with it more wisely. And that includes engaging with the emotional world, yours and others. If you can do that, if you can stay open when it would be easier to shut down, you become the kind of person people don't just respect, they trust. So let's leave behind the old dismissive habits. Let's replace judgment with curiosity, defense with dialogue, and most of all, let's stop pretending that being emotionally closed is a badge of honor. Because it's not. Empathy is strength, awareness is strength, and the willingness to understand someone else, even when it stretches you, is one of the highest forms of wisdom. That's what makes you stoic. That's what makes you human. At the end of the day, the words we speak shape the lives we live. They reveal our discipline, our awareness, our fears, and our growth. You don't need to be perfect, but you do need to be honest, not just with others, but with yourself. And if even one of these phrases made you pause, that's where the work begins. If you're ready to keep sharpening your mind and mastering your emotions, watch the next video on your screen. It was made for you. Thank you for being a part of Stoic Journal. Keep showing up, keep reflecting, keep becoming.